All right. I think it's time for us to start. So, what I would like to do is I would like to introduce Darwin Lang. So it is my great pleasure that he has agreed to give us all a presentation here in the class. Darwin is a founding member of Good AI Capital, which is a venture fund that invests in early stage AI companies. Today, Darwin is going to tell us about AI in healthcare and improving lives one bit at a time. Prior to starting this venture fund, he was founder of startup Smarter Me, which got acquired. He's a Boot alum and distinguished alum from Purdue, where he got a degree in computer science and mathematics, and also a master's degree in computer science. Without further ado, Darwin, please tell us about your endeavors. I think you are muted.
Yep, got it. Okay. So in this Zoom age, this is always the #1 challenge is to unmute. Always forgot. So good to see everybody. So this is Darwin. Greetings from Hong Kong. I am currently in quarantine day number 3 at my hotel. So I'm here visiting my family here. When Mladen asked me to do a presentation, hopefully at that time was in person. I said, unfortunately I'll be quarantining, but actually that might work out. Essentially, I got locked up in a hotel. I can't go anywhere. So, it's a perfect place to do a remote lecture. And hopefully, and I saw that a lot of those the students here today are actually also joining from Zoom. So I think that actually worked out, quite nicely. So without further ado, let's start at the beginning. So today's topic is in AI in healthcare, and of course, I think I've been. I understand that Mladen has been teaching the class machine learning, and he is to try to bring a different industry perspectives towards AI and how AI is being used and applied towards a different industrial segments or sectors here. So I think we chose healthcare. Healthcare is some of the main main sector that we invest in. And of course, when during the whole pandemic here is kind of front and center, this is affecting everybody's lives. So I thought this is a very important topic to speak to you today. And the topic is also, it's kind of a pun, to improving lives one bit at a time. So we know that doing programming, computer programming in bits and 0 and 1s. So now it's how can we improve or even save lives using computer technology, one bit at a time here. So just a quick introduction about Good AI Capital. So as we have alluded earlier, so Good AI Capital is a venture fund. We invest in early stage AI companies in the sector of fintech, healthcare, as well as B2B enterprise SaaS, software as a services. So we have a interesting name. We call it the Good AI Capital. It stems from our investment thesis, with a mission-driven investment thesis of doing well by doing good. So we invest in technical founders or entrepreneurs who are keen on using technology, and in this case, AI, in tackling some of the most challenging problems faced across different industries. Some of you might have heard of the term ESG investment, which stands for environmental sustainability, social responsibility, and corporate governances. So essentially, this is what we do. ESG is something where we care a lot, and we actually go further than kind of looking at some of the from a asset class perspective. So these are the values that define who we are, and this is define how we operate and actually characterize how we invest in companies and founders. they have to share the same values and in a way that resonate with us. And together we think this is actually what we call a secret sauce for our investment, where we can actually achieve the impact towards the society as well as the outsized financial outcome here. So I think a lot of you may have studied, understand, heard of the term alpha. We're seeking alpha. This is our alpha. This is how we can seek alpha and create that outsized return, financial profitability. So I think the final point that we want to talk about is also sort of like a differentiation against the more general VC or venture capital. So we have a lot of what we call commercialization experiences. And by that, essentially, we work with the tech transfer organizations and universities. We work with those organizations to identify some of their most transformative IPs, actually their intellectual properties. So, as we all understand, a lot of these intellectual properties are developed by researchers, scientists. They're coming out from the lab here. A lot of them actually are just like, sitting on a shelf. A lot of them are not being commercialized. And by that meaning, developing to a product, trying to be finding potential customers and ultimately, seeking revenue from those customers, right? So, we basically go into this, the universities, work with them, and try to kind of in a way spin up new companies in a way from those labs, and then nurture them towards the next steps, the milestones, and ultimately turn them into the most successful companies. Okay, so let's talk about, this is the first area of our interest. The first area is called synthetic biology. So a lot of you may have heard of the term. It sounds very science fiction. What exactly is that? So this is an area where all of us, and I'm sure that we're programming computers. We talk about zeros and ones at the first slide here. So cell program essentially is doing the same thing. We're programming cells. We're doing reading, writing, and editing of DNA sequences inside the cells here. So DNA is essentially the foundational generic makeup of the cells, of every cells. So if you have an opportunity where you can programming, and by programming, you can actually changing the potential behavior of that cell, and that can have really wide-ranging and large potential applications towards medicine and therapeutic solutions here. So this is actually a very, very interesting area. One of the current trends that are taking place in synthetic biology is, or the most widely used way is to use the engineering microbes. Microbes is essentially microorganisms to manufacture desired products. So a lot of us is already familiar with this process. In fact, we are using yeast potentially to do the brewery for beers we all enjoy, cheese product, and our bread, the sourdough bread, everything. Yeast is kind of like the microorganism that makes all these different products available. So what the current, the leading kind of way to do synthetic biology is basically programming the yeast. So now yeast is no longer just being limited by looking at sort of the natural way of creating new products. Because of the programming, we can change the behavior of that yeast. We can engineer the yeast so that it can produce new products or existing products in a more sustainable manner. So we talked about the applications. So, of course, we talk medicine, healthcare, and it has a wide-ranging, application towards consumer products, agriculture, food, and industrial new materials that potentially is not even found before, that are potentially has a larger cost benefit and more sustainable in terms of production and things like that. Okay, so here's the step. So okay, this is so wonderful, right? So synthetic biology. So why wait until now? Why is it happening now? Why is such a cool thing now? In fact, actually, there's several kind of like supporting factors that are leading the current trend here. So the number one, the most important one, is actually what we call the drastic cost decline in genomic sequencing. So genomic sequencing essentially is just the reading of our genomics. So we talk about read, write, and execute. The first thing is that you gotta have a way to read your code, right? So or read the cell makeup, the DNA in the human body, right? So on the kind of like right-hand column of the slide here, you see it's like a little graph here. So oh, sorry, I missed a slide here. Let me just go back to the, because of the jumping of the slide. So instead of talking about that, the why now slide, let's actually go to this slide first. So, you know, one of the, I want to showcase this company called Ginkgo Bioworks. Ginkgo Bioworks is one of the leading synthetic biology company. It went IPO just last year with a SPAC IPO. It has about, you know, a 12 billion valuation when it went IPO. Unfortunately, the stock market all took a kind of like a beating. So the current stock value has kind of halved. But regardless, I think this is a great representation of the potential of the technology here. So first of all, we talk about the wide-ranging applications. You know, from consumer tech and, you know, for food and all that. So this is essentially all the product line, all the pipelines for Ginkgo Bioworks. You know, we talked about, you know, food and, you know, consumer tech. So, you know, if you look at, you know, pay a little bit attention here on the column, consumer tech, actually it supports new cannabis product, or a more sustainable way of producing cannabis. And on the food column, or the food and nutrition column, they are actually also engaged in the plant-based meat production. Think of them as the Impossible Burger. So when you take a bite in it, there is it tastes like real meat. And part of it is because they have this element called heme. So heme essentially represent the hemoglobin, or the blood, if you will, of the meat. And that's why it tastes good. So it might sound disgusting when I talked about it, but actually that is why it, you know, a plant-based burger can taste like a real burger. But at the same time, you know, when you try to look at the ingredients of a plant-based burger, it just cannot find that element in that. So where do they get that heme into the plant-based burger? So essentially they're using the synthetic biology way, and Ginkgo Bioworks has a way to create that heme by actually going through the engineering process, engineering yeast to create a heme that are no longer actually, it is still based on, you know, not necessarily from the actual animal cell, but more so is based on the yeast production here. So this is really, really amazing how they can achieve that. So it has that application towards the food we eat. And finally, of course, we're talking healthcare today. So, you know, you can see that, you know, on the pharma side, you know, they have several very impactful applications towards cell and gene therapies. And of course, you know, we're facing the pandemic. One of the things that Gingko is working on is with the Moderna, in terms of the COVID-19 vaccine, they help them to streamline the production of those vaccines. So this is actually a very a large, wide range of applications, as illustrated here by the broad pipelines that Ginkgo Bioworks has. Okay, so we come to this slide here. So I think we kind of jumped this a little bit. So I think when we were at this slide, we're talking about the cost decline. So, and we're referring to the diagram on the right. So essentially, so what we talking about is, this is on the 1990, in the 1990, in order to do like one string of the genomic sequencing, it takes almost like a $95 million. And fast forward to 2016, you come down to a fraction of that, which is less than $100 or even like, sub $100 here. So, this to you may not say, okay, so what, right? So I would actually refer you to another kind of like technology advances in the computer. Some of you might have heard of a term, Moore's law. So Moore's law is essentially representing the speed of innovation of a semiconductor industry, of a chip. So in Moore's law, it states the fact that the number of transistors within a chip would double, while the cost of that is going down. So, and that essentially is the driving factor for our computer revolution or technology revolution here. Because of that, significant cost drop, you have spurs new innovation in terms of everything from, of course, at the first is a computer, but now it's a mobile, and in AI, everything is become much more cost effective, thanks to Moore's law, if you will. So the same thing's happening. We actually coined it, the name is a Carson's curve instead of Moore's. So Carson's is essentially representing the cost decline for genomic sequencing here. So the second bullet point that I want to bring to your attention is there are really great advances in terms of AI, or more specifically the databases for prediction in the biological data here. So one of the area, the new discovery, actually DeepMind is a Google's AI arm. So they have released a database called AlphaFold. So AlphaFold essentially is a basically allows you to look at genomic makeup or genomic sequences and do a prediction against the protein fold. So protein fold essentially refers to a structure of the protein, and how they fold essentially represent, what is structure of that protein. So even though it's the same protein, potentially they fold differently. And, we have identified that because of that structural change, certain diseases are actually associated to the structure of that. So, we call it like, if you fold it correctly, then, the person is healthy. However, if there is a malfolding or the folding in an incorrect way, then actually lead to some of the actual diseases here. So some of the most, one of the most interesting is that there is like a discovery where, for Alzheimer's disease, some of the neurodegenerative diseases here, they find that actually in a lot of these patients, the protein is folded incorrectly. So the question is that what leads to that? So as there's still no cure for some of these diseases here. But now with some of the databases advances, such as the DeepMind, so essentially you can say potentially predict what exactly leads to that problem, if you will, right? So that's actually, I think we talk about AI is essentially doing a prediction model. So that actually has a significant advances in helping discovery of medicine. We talk about, the application of synthetic biology. So now you understand what happens. Now the question is, how do we fix it? Or how do we cure the diseases? So these databases will assist that effort tremendously. So another part is the robotics and automation. So prior to say, I guess in today's, a lot of these drug discovery process, there's already existing a process where we leverage computational data, the chemistry data, and do a really sort of like a matching, if you will. They want to use that data, chemical data, molecules to match whether they can bind to a targets and all that. So this is all good if you actually have the data And more importantly, how can you actually perform the data or generate the data? So one of the kind of key advances in robotics automation, we're seeing all this robotic arm that are involved in creating, in manufacturing, the car manufacturing. So the same thing could be used for actually doing the data generation. And in this case, it's actually potentially doing the testing from, whether a molecule has a response or the protein has certain responses to a molecule and all that. So basically, you have to do it, in a very scalable and large, a very scalable and manner, right? So automation plays a huge role. As we saw, robotics automation is all about scalability for the manufacturing and also cost too, right? So human doing all this work in human is just simply not a feasible way. So now, with data that allows us to, create just generate this data. So with more data, our AI model will become better. As I'm sure Mladen mentioned that in the class here, data is becoming the key piece of the driving forces of one of the more successful AI model. Now, with doing the same thing in the healthcare, right? So this is exactly, saying I think this is something that is critical. So the third kind of bullet point is what we call the gene editing technology. It's not so much on the AI, but actually it's a transformative discovery. So CRISPR is a technology that allows you to gene editing technology. So it actually won the 2020 Nobel Prize by Jennifer Doudna. It was a groundbreaking technology. So the idea of a CRISPR essentially is like, let's say you find something, a bad gene, if you will, right? Now you need to, how do we kind of fix it? So to fix it, you actually send in the CRISPR, go in there, and then identify the bad genes. And you basically have what we call, they actually have look like a scissors, cut that off, and then replace it with the good genes, if you will. So that you can fix whatever the disease or problem that this person potentially has, right? So it's a transformative project, and actually it's already making waves in the medical community here. So, so that's actually also going back to say, we said, what is synthetic biology? So reading, writing, now it's the editing that allows us to kind of come to this phase here. And finally, sort of like, if we need proof, these are the great therapeutic solutions like gene therapies and cell therapies that are taking place, that are making great impact to people's lives. It's already in place, and thanks to the synthetic biology. So that's kind of the result. So one of the key things that I want to bring to your attention is a therapy called CAR-T cancer therapies. So in the previous times, to treat cancer, we all go through chemotherapies and all that. So this is actually new therapies. And the way to do it is actually using T cells. T cells essentially is white blood cells that you actually can go in there. So basically they can actually program the T cell, if you will, change it so that you can go back to the human body and then go actually, they can identify the potential cancer cells and then kill them. So that's actually is a therapeutic solutions that's making huge progress right now. Okay, so the next slide that I want to kind of bring to your attention is another area called precision medicine. So the definition of precision medicine is to tailor the treatment and therapeutics based on the patient's profile, right? So, so no longer is a kind of one-size-fits-all kind of approach where, oh, you have a cold, you have a disease, I'm going to give you a drug or a pill for that to take, and then at the end you'll be okay. So gone are the day, it is still, this is the most traditional way, but now we actually can, prescribe a very customized or personalized therapeutics treatment towards patient. And one of the emerging sort of like, thing that I'm feeling that trend is that now we can get all kinds of data. Data from your Apple Watch, you can measure your heartbeat, your blood pressure, and as we see, there are things like your MRI, your imaging, all that are actually create essentially various sources of data that you can gather. And I think some of you may question, so why, if I have a heart disease, why is something certain that I seemingly that is a non-related data sources can help me? So in fact, actually, we don't know, and I cannot answer you the question. But but I think one thing that I do know is that I think from what you learn potentially from your machine learning class, so one of the key ideas that if you were to build a neural net, you have to gather data from all sources here. Of course, you have a more intelligent way of focusing on certain data. But when you start, this is actually how you kind of gather the data, and you kind of grab the sort of the relevance or the correlation towards the actual outcome. So you gather data, and from there you can actually create a model. So in a way, yes, no, we don't know why you want to collect a certain data, but the data is available. Let's collect it and create a model. And ultimately, we want to create a very targeted medicine or treatment for a patient, and that actually end up to be a quite a successful approach, if you will. So that kind of sums it up as like what precision medicine is. A very broad stroke, broad definition, but because of this the trend of this data and AI, we can actually apply that towards a various different kind of modalities, which is when you say modalities, it's a different actually way of treatment. Okay, so couple companies I want to bring to your attention here. The first company is called Guardant Health. Guardant Health is a publicly traded company, went listed a couple of years ago. So it's actually doing liquid biopsy. So liquid biopsy is like for cancer testing, or for the blood testing for cancer patients. But the thing is, there's a very customized kind of prescription, if you will, for a certain cancer treatment. So you really need to have using an AI in this case here to do that precision medicine. So again, we talk about data, we talk about AI. So Guardant Health did a great work in terms of using that mechanism. And ultimately, this modality is just like for liquid biopsy, right? So the testing part. So that's a good illustration of what precision medicine is. And another company I want to bring to attention is the Livongo. So it's actually a totally different company. It's a telehealth company. It has an app that allows you to monitor patients, particularly to help improve some of the chronic disease such as diabetes. Livongo has been acquired by another telehealth company, Teladoc. So just right in the middle of a pandemic here. Again, it's actually focusing on the personalized management for diabetes, right? So a lot of these diabetes, as we know, is a chronic disease. Diabetes cannot be ultimately treated, but you can manage it. So a lot of these factors can alter the potential of that treatment, right? So if you have just, we all know that, okay, we need to eat better, do exercise and all that. So, but how do we know when to do exercise, what to eat and all that? So that's a kind of like, essentially it's a prescription that can help the patients in managing the diabetes, right? So actually that's, they use a digital health tool, which is an app here that allows you to do exactly that. So the last one is actually one of the company that we advise as a Circle Cardiovascular Imaging. So we kind of like wide ranging, talk about, the MRI, of your heart, right? So we talk about it, and typically, when you take an MRI, the idea is that, okay, let's see if your heart has a problem, right? But in this case here, having a certain indication that something's there, we don't know whether actually that's the cause of the problem. Even with a trained eye of a doctor or the radiologist, they might not know. So that's actually where the whole precision medicine AI comes in here to say there's some anomalies they may detect, but maybe not. Maybe we just gather the data first. So basically, they provide the data, as part of their process, and they have a neural net model. Basically, just keep refining the model as we see more data and all that. So at the end, is becoming a precision, basically the treatment or the prediction of the treatment has become better and better as they get in more data. So this is actually an application towards the, imaging, healthcare imaging here. Okay, so this is the slide that I want to talk about. Is a company that we invested in. It's called Aether Biomachines. It's one of our portfolio companies. We invested in the company in 2021. So it's an amazing company. It's a very it's focused on using enzymes in to basically engineering enzymes to for synthetic biology. So earlier we've talked about using yeast for the fermentation process. For actually during the fermentation process, enzymes plays a large role in terms of catalyzing, the ultimate output or the outcome of that. So in nature, enzyme can be considered as a nano factory, if you will. So the factory itself essentially is a tool we can use. So we can specify the type of molecules that potentially can create the product, and basically just do the input towards the enzymes, and at the end they will create the desirable product with the sort of the outcome that we're looking for. As part of that, they use machine learning, of course, for the discovery, and high-level robots. Basically, robots are the ones that are responsible for collecting data, generating data, and then feeding towards the AI model that they're using. So it has a far-reaching applications in terms of different products, different industries here. So I'm going to play you guys the video. This is a video that is done by Aether. So let's see. Okay, so
when you look around in our modern society, we manufacture almost everything. Whether it's the food that we eat, to the clothes that we wear, to the oil which is generating our cars, to the drugs that we take, everything is manufactured, typically through a chemical process.
In chemical manufacturing, it's typically a long chain of reactions to get the product that you want.
They boil, they freeze, they electrocute.
So you can imagine big plants, high temperature, high pressure.
Not only is that bad for the environment, but it's incredibly inefficient.
It's not the shortest way, it's not the most optimal way, it's not the most elegant solution. It's, we happened upon this way to transform A to B. And so what Aether is doing is saying, actually, there's a better way to do this.
Nature has evolved products that are far more complex than anything humans can build. At Aether, we are taking the machinery of nature from its biological context and we're engineering it to work for humans. And the magic ingredient is the enzyme. All an enzyme is a tiny little factory. It takes a set of atoms, it rearranges them to make a new set of atoms. So in this case, A and B are now combined. And what's incredibly powerful about this is the enzyme combines all the power and sophistication of a gigantic chemical factory, but on the scale of nanometers. So for any product you want, any arrangement of atoms you want, there is an enzyme that can do it.
One of the main challenges is that there are many millions of enzymes out there. So identifying which enzymes could do the reaction that you're interested in is a needle in a haystack.
But because we have a system that can test millions of different enzymes, we actually can generate data sets large enough to map this space.
We're testing enzymes and substrates together and how they react, and then measuring the output of that reaction. And so traditionally the way that might happen in sort of an academic setting would be in these tubes, sort of one reaction at a time. And we're trying to do millions of reactions a month. And so we're doing this in plates that have 96, 384, sometimes 1536 wells in them. We're not stopping here. We're going to continue scaling down and miniaturizing.
And if Aether can continue to generate data the way we are today, we'll own 95% of the world's biological manufacturing data in just 3 years.
By combining high-throughput robotics with machine learning, with synthetic biology, we are able to map the enzyme space, much in the same way that Google indexed the internet.
As that map comes into focus, it allows us to build better enzymes for our customers, but the long-term goal is to build novel enzymes that haven't been made before.
So today, what we provide our customers is a recipe for the enzyme, and then they go manufacture it themselves, helping them make their products cheaper and helping them make novel products more quickly. But we'll also create a future where, rather than having these gigantic polluting factories that produce products that we use every day, you could imagine shipping container-sized factories where you shrink down all the important chemical transformations and manufacturing steps onto the scale of the enzyme. Once you do that, you have completely decentralized industrial manufacturing. You've made it possible for the billions of people on Earth who do not live lives like ours to build any product at incredibly low cost and grow economically without destroying the planet, creating a future worth living in for every single human being on Earth.
Okay, all right. So okay, going back to this here. Okay, so let's go back here. So I want to kind of go back and talk about Aether Bio. So I think basically what I just say is essentially kind of high-level introduction has been captured much more elegantly, much more nicely in the video here. You usually pick up when you kind of match the actual visual image, in this case, it's more video, how you have this like kind of big factory versus a small factory. I think everything seems to make sense here. So we talk about enzymes is sort of like a nanometer or nano factory, right? So they have a little diagram of a small factory here. Think of that, essentially it's doing all that. So with that, we kind of can do away without the more traditional way of manufacturing, which rely on this big factory, centralized, that are not sustainable, that are kind of very difficult or costly to maintain, and now with a much more efficient way of creating new materials here. Another thing is that I think what draws your attention is that they have this gentleman try to talk about how they automate the process here. So when you see the actual like the test tubes moving around here, then you need to kind of do this potential maneuvering, if you will, in a more automated, autonomous way here. So this is where the robots is coming in here. And ultimately, they want to use this to create new data. So, one of the gentlemen, his name is Vas, in the Vas Sudev, actually. He was actually in the video, he said, well, in about 3 years, Aether Bio machines will be creating 95% of the biological manufacturing data. I think that's actually quite amazing if you think about that. And essentially, you might say, well, is that going to be doable? And I think the answer is yes. And otherwise, we won't be investing. So we're very proud that this company is able to achieve whatever they have achieved. Now I think they're on their way to that goal. So another thing is also they talk about the data. So they compare how Google is basically mapping the entire internet or indexing the internet so that you can do search. So essentially they are doing something similar, but for biological data. They're mapping all this manufacturing biological data and create an index. So, and that what is that index for? It's a database for doing the discovery for enzymes. Now it's allowing to what we call the 0 to 1 problem, where from nothing to the first step, right? So once you get to the 0 to 1, then afterwards it's all about optimization and And so now the challenge lies in that, the very first critical step. Where do you find that? And then I think what, they talk about using the term finding a needle in a haystack. We heard this term. It's a very cliche term. We talk about, especially in AI, to try to, how do you find a haystack, find a needle in a haystack? So they have the technology, they have the data, they have the focus on enzymes. I think they're on their way to achieve those goals here. Okay, so here's a link. In this slide here is actually a blog post. It's a blog post about announcement for Aether Bio. So one of the interesting title is that it's a post-scarcity future. So what does that mean? So I think, if you kind of follow the whole video, materials are scarce. And, meaning, there's a limited supply. And there's many factors that lead to that, right? And so the idea is that if you have this more scalable way to create new materials or novel products or novel materials, then essentially we are creating a new way to create, new materials. And one of some very interesting side background is that the CEO, his name is Pathlight, he shows up in the video. He talked about, he mentioned a little bit about his vision. So actually his background is very interesting. He grew up in the former Serbia, Herzegovina. So actually coming out from that kind of like, a lot of like a war tension, war-torn country. He see actually, at least from him, is that, a lot of these are caused by materials or the products or the unavailability, not able to access that product. And that's why you guys could call this like conflicts, that, people are trying to do. And I think right now we're actually facing a similar situation. There's a war going on between Russia and Ukraine. In a way, that might be a little bit too far-reaching. A lot of you may question, but in a way, we are seeing that a lot of these fundamental problem is caused by this, basically scarcity of future of materials or product. So with that, actually, it's a long-term vision that the CEO is set out to do. He want to do that, and it's a very aligned of what we wanted to do. Also, remember one of the kind of critical factor that we want to invest is sort of the ESG, right? ESG stands for environmental sustainability. So we want to do that, right? So this is actually very aligned with good AI. Of course, the technology it's one of the key factors that drives our decision, but it's really also the values that really kind of bring us all together here. Okay, and the last slide here, I think I want to talk about some of our investment process, and we have what we call a 6-point investment lens. This is how we invest in the AI companies, if you will, or some of the portfolio companies here. So the first thing we talked about is we look for interesting IPs from universities. So the first thing we'll look for is actually the IPs, the intellectual properties. And we talk about where do we source them, in the first slide from universities. Of course, that's actually how we get the discussion started, right? But, as we know, this is something, IP is great, but, a lot of them are just sitting on a shelf, as I have mentioned in the first slide, right? So we need to turn them into product. And, some of them, of the company that we invested, they already achieved what we call product market fit, right? So what that means is that, so by product market fit, if you come from a tech world, you might have heard of the term. It's basically a fancy way of saying that, okay, my product is good enough that people actually want to use it and potentially even buy it. So, but that has been a challenge for a lot of tech product, when they're early stage, you build a product, but, nobody want to use it. So that's actually something where it's lacking. So of course, in the sort of biotech world or life sciences world, this is of course even a more important question, right? But the question is, do you actually have to develop, say, the actual end product, meaning the drugs, the medical device, and the product that, potential the consumer product that people has to use it. So from our angle, from a lot of these life sciences company or synthetic biology company, so what they do is that they're not necessarily the end products. They don't create the end drugs. They don't develop the final drugs. But essentially, they provide all the platform and the technology to support that particular development. I think Ginkgo Bioworks is a great example. It has all the automation, they have all the AI, the databases to enable that platform so that they can apply for different product line, pipelines, and all that, right? So for us, going back to the product market fit, is that a lot of these companies that we invest in, they're essentially the picks and shuffles, if you will. They provide the advances or the tools that are needed by this pharmaceutical company, for example. So, we talk about drug discovery. So drug discovery is it's a very long process. It's a very expensive process here. So a lot of these companies that we invested in, if they can have the tool to help shorten the cycle, meaning if you can cut it down from $1 billion to say $500 million, and then you can cut down, the cost from the time from 10 years to 5 years. That's a huge value that you can deliver to the large pharma, to the company. So in this case, we talk about product market fit. So this is essentially say, if a lot of these pharma's company or the materials company, they are paying, they're actually using the technology provided by startups to develop their drugs and all that. A lot of the company that in fact the tools that they provide, actually they are able to say advance the delivery of a certain milestone, for example, and that's all it matters. If you can actually cut it down, like shorten the cycle, the farmer is going to pay you multi-million-dollar contract just because you meet the milestone. So I think that's a great point to take note with, and that's essentially the product market fit that we're looking at. Okay. So the third kind of category is important. Again, it's not going to talk about the diversified business pipeline. So I ask you to go back to the whole Ginkgo Bioworks. Why do I want to show that slide that they have all these different industry or verticals they're tackling it? So this is actually by design. Like I said before, this Ginkgo Bioworks is a platform company, but they also have the kind of like vision that they want to support different industries, and by that they want to create a platform so that they can have a diversified. So they don't want to like essentially there's a term is that put all your basket into put your eggs in one basket, right? So I mean, this is a very intuitive term that we understand and applies to the financial, for investment, right? So you don't want to invest every single thing into one single thing. Invest all your money into one single thing. You want to have a diversified portfolio to reduce risk. So in the same way that the company that we want to invest is a picks and shovels, a platform company. If they can actually target different industries for potential different applications, different use cases for those companies here, they actually diversify their risk. And of course, you have to create a very robust platform, a robust technology that can support different industries. And that's actually what we're looking for here. So it's not so much on the AI or the machine learning side, how you use AI in this case. It's more from a risk mitigation, risk control perspective. But this is critical. This is no longer just sitting on top of the technology that criteria that we consider. It's actually sort of the business strategies that some of these companies are pursuing. So this is critical for us. And because we have already seen it, in order to achieve that, we need to have a diversified business pipeline. So the fourth category is more focusing on the more traditional value metric, business value metrics, applies more towards assess countries and not. So okay. So we're looking at growth metrics and so on and so forth. And the final two kind of category I want to bring to your attention is, of course, when as a VC, as an investor, price matters, valuation matters. So we look at a lot of like comps or comparables for similar companies in order to determine the price of the company, so they can determine how we want to invest in the company. We don't want everybody the exuberant price for the company, because otherwise we won't be able to make money with our investment here. So the last part is that we look for strong investor syndicate when we try to invest. So we don't want to take up the whole deal ourselves. Usually we want to look for co-investors, strong co-investors and value-added investors here in order to kind of like we want to bring a diverse, sort of like a diversified. Again, is the word diversified that I like to use. You want to bring people with different, who can add different values, and so this is how we want to play our game here. And particularly, I think some of the the biotech company, you need to really from a corporate or sort of like industrial strategic value. So we look for even corporate investors such as Novartis, the pharmaceutical companies. And by the way, Novartis, the GSK of the world, as well as Merck, they are all of our co-investors in our portfolio companies. And the reason that they're investing is, first of all, we talk about being the customer, right? These guys are actually the customer of for these portfolio companies. They need to buy the tools, they need to use the technology to help advances their drug development and so on and so forth. And of course, with that, like I mentioned, I mentioned that a lot of these companies, they are not the experts in a lot of these technologies. So they rely on some of the startups to help their causes, if you will. So now it's actually trying to look at, so now they can use the technology, and at the end, they want to invest in the company also, because some of the IPs and technology can benefit them as well, right? So they may not see that as a immediate need for their current drug development, but but who knows? Far down the future, a lot of them can be used for other product development. So that's the one that they want to be engaged as a investor, so that they can actually reap the benefits of the future growth of the company as well. Okay, so to sum it up, I think our investment process for our portfolio companies is to really focus on the lower risk and to maximize IRR. So we are in booth, we are all take finance class here. Risk is essentially, you want to mitigate. You want to construct a portfolio company that actually minimize the beta, if you will, or maybe try to have a high beta, but somehow a balanced portfolio, so that actually you can minimize the risk here. If you invest in 10 companies, the chances of 10 companies failing is low, right? If you have then you can actually have a much more potential chances of achieving the actual financial return. And maximum IRR is actually the return, the financial return that you'll be getting from the investment. Okay, so with that, I am gonna pause here, and I would I've yielded the floor to students, and you guys can come ask the questions, and love to speak to you about talk to you about questions here.
Well, thank you very much, Darwin. So
Yep.
Folks in Zoom, like maybe you can either unmute yourself and ask questions, Darwin, or if you guys would like to ask questions, feel free to ask.
Oh, nice. Okay, so I see Thomas.
Thank you very much, Darwin. This was very interesting indeed. My question refers much to something between the market fit and the risks of investments.
Okay.
I work in agriculture policy, so I'm much interested in how do you approach these kinds of investments in terms of the different regulations that affect, I don't know, IP and registration of genetic events and etc. How do you approach in the long and medium term all these innovations and how they adapt to regulations? Because we know regulations always come after advancements. So how do you how do you weight regulations in all these equations?
Yeah, so the short answer to that, or short response, is that we don't. And actually, it's not that we don't want to deal with it. It's just that a lot of our startups are not just doesn't have the capability to tackle that. So what we do, remember we talked about, we invest in the picks and shovels, right? So basically, it's just like, think of it as the computers that people can buy. And in this case, it's the pharma companies or the large corporation. They have an end goal to create new products. They have new drugs, potentially need to go through clinical trials, FDA approval, and all that. So we actually let the big guys to handle that. So they have the money, they have the experience, they have the know-how, they have the lawyers, everybody is on their side, right? Now it's just a matter of now they say, okay, now you can buy this technology from this startup here, and essentially they can be part of it. So the value proposition is very strong. Basically, if you just say, I can actually help you advance your clinical trial, instead of 5 years, I can shorten it to 1 year. To them, it's the most important word they want to hear, right? So they will buy it. They will pay millions and millions of dollars for technology. Of course, the startup need to deliver the milestones. But in case they do, then actually that's something where, you reach the milestone, you reach that contract, you fulfill your contract, and you got your payout. So that's actually how I think would be one of the best example that how we can deal with that. Having said that, we actually, a longer version is that we actually, we have built our network of advisors that are actually specifically try to tackle some of these challenges here. So in the potentially next slide, in the next time. So we have a lot of industry experts as an advisors here. That includes some of the former COO of Eli Lilly, GE Healthcare. These are the people that have basically done all that. They are retired now, they are investors now, but at the same time, they can bring their know-how and actually help a lot of our startups into how to navigate those challenges. Eventually, that's something where they have to deal with. And now we are building all the advisory board of our advisors and the connections too. So, we have, we talk about, having the strategic alliances with a company like Robotics, GSK, and all that, right? So these are the people, they can bring the expertise into our network. So by that actually can help some of our potential startups to navigate those challenges. So that's kind of like, something where we are prepared to do, and we're not trying to avoid it. And then we know this is actually, we have an edge. It's not just focusing, again, it's the technology itself. Technology is a part of it, but at the same time, the major part is that how do you deal with governance is something we care deeply also. So I hope I answered your question.
So I saw another hand. I think Shubham, you had a question?
Yeah. Go ahead, Shubham.
Yeah, hi Darwin. Thanks for the presentation. So I just have a question about the gain of function research, like with the pandemic and all. There's a lot of scrutiny about the gain of function research, and like a lot of people are kind of trying to stop it. I'm just curious to know what your perspective on that. Will they succeed, and how it will be shaping some of the new researches coming out in this field?
So you're saying that you're seeing a lot of effort that try to stop the research because of the pandemic? I'm not quite sure I understand the question. Maybe you can rephrase that a little bit. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, so I was reading a few articles which says that some of some of the reason why they were attributing the pandemic came out was because of the gain of function research. There were a few theories around that. And based on those hypotheses, a lot of people were kind of, including scientists and academicians, were trying to say that gain of function is not the right way to go for in the future. So we should be stopping it. I'm just curious to know, like, if you have, what's your perspective on that? Like, how do you think?
Did you say gain of function? Is that what you mentioned?
Yeah, gain of function.
So basically, you have incremental gain of a certain function. Let's say in a therapeutic solution or something. Is that what kind of it means? That I'm not familiar with that term, gain of function.
Oh, okay. So it basically is a way to enhance the biological function of a gene product.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay, got it. Okay, all right. So, again, I think going back, our investment policies or investment focus on the picks and shuffles again, right? So, data is critical. They are not necessarily the company that are focusing on enhancing an incremental output or incremental value for the product here. They're looking at really a giant leap, if you will, for some of the value. And of course, they're at a lot of them actually, again, they're not at the research stage. They're in the product stage. And what that means, they actually have data that they have, generated. And, and of course, the customers look at the data, they like it, and then they're willing to invest or they want to be a customer. So that's kind of like, again, it's how we see it. So we're not trying to touch on the sort of research again, because then I think there's nothing, it's already beyond, that's too early for us to invest and all that. So I don't know if I have a specific comment towards that gain of function. But I think that's, kind of what we're seeing, at least from our perspective. Sorry if I didn't answer your question in a more succinct way, but actually that's something maybe it's not in my core focus, therefore I cannot answer the question to your satisfaction maybe, but that's how I see it.
Well, thank you so much.
Yeah. And then I say DJ or
yeah, DJ is fine. Anything that's works.
DJ.
Thanks for the time, Darwin. Really insightful. I learned a lot. Just a simple question as to, you said, these nanofactors would be able to build a lot of, stuff going forward. Is there a limitation as to what they're still not trying to, not being able to build, or is there a holy grail?
Well, of course, there's always limitations, right? So I think this is enzymes is very good at, as you see from the video, from manipulating the molecules, right? So basically, this is not even synthetic biology. It's just like, how do you create, a lot of you may take some organic chemistry. So basically, you look at the chemical structure, it's like a lot of like molecule with a lot of sticks connecting together with a sort of like multiple structures here. So the idea is that how do we create from the sort of the elemental molecule into that, right? So enzymes turn out to be a very good way to do that, but it also has a challenge. I think the challenge is basically how do you even discover what molecule to use, right? So that's part of like the challenge, right? I guess to answer your question is the sky's the limit, but unfortunately we're still at the first inning in terms of like what we can do here. So I want to kind of give you a perspective. Some of the product that Aether Bio is already currently working on. One of the material they're working on is a Kevlar. So Kevlar, if you do a Google search, is actually a material that is used for a lot of bulletproof vest. The current way of doing that, actually, there's some cost limit. There's also some of the functions of that Kevlar. So what they do actually, they are essentially, Aether is building a new version of the Kevlar. Think of it as a new product, a better product than the existing one, with a better cost, better sustainable way of producing it, and and better characteristic maybe is a way that actually can do a better protection and all that, right? And actually, that turned out that the new cath lab that they're building actually have other applications towards some of the products that we're looking at. So the product is a new cath lab, but at the same time, there are actually multiple end products that can be spun off from that also. So that's sort of like the exciting way that I'm looking at it. It's like, you just don't stop at, okay, let's create a new cannabis product, right? So that could be interesting, but but to me, I think the opportunity lies into the new frontier that's available. While it's unknown, but we have enough data that proves that a lot can be done, and it's been proven that actually the customer wants it and they're paying for it. Think of the Dow Chemical of the world, that they're willing to pay for this kind of technology. And this sounds very, very exciting to me.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions, folks? So maybe I will ask you maybe a question I asked you earlier. So how do you see really kind of developments of machine learning in the healthcare in maybe next 5 years? Because for the company you used as a showcase, it is more about kind of other aspects, and machine learning is maybe facilitating something towards that goal, but it's really, I think, a side role in the synthetic biology case. And also, like, what is the role of machine learning maybe in other food areas that your company would consider investing in?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think just quickly, I think, of course, the trend itself, it seems like machine learning is more like a sort of like a side, I guess, project or side factor for a lot of these healthcare company. At the end, I think that we have to understand it sounds like that, but if you look at kind of one of the slides that, but without machine learning, none of these stuff that we're talking about is even possible. Okay, so so I would just say continue to support that kind of effort, and the more data we generated, which we will, and then remember also look at the precision medicine. We're gathering data from all sources now, right? So then that create a huge wealth of input towards our, some of the potential modalities, different sort of like the indication that we can look at. So that create a very exciting to me. So that's sort of like where we see, of course, the whole telehealth, mobile applications, area in terms of the mental health. We talk about diabetes, but mental health, as we kind of seeing right now, as we all suffering from the pandemic, this has become a huge issue. So a lot of the sort of like the apps or the digital health can actually address that. So that's something we, again, machine learning, AI is part of it, but more so is actually from not only from gathering data, from a sort of behavior change, if you will. So I think we all know that we want to eat healthy, we all know that we need to exercise, but why aren't we doing this, right? So the question is, if we can actually provide sort of like a psychological nudge or push, and motivate, and we can use that for to help the patients, then it will achieve some quite impactful outcome here. And of course, now with the whole digital health that that requires the data, then actually that create also a wealth of opportunity to achieve that goals here. So in terms of other areas, so we invest in fintech. So one of the companies that I invest early on in fintech is called SoFi. SoFi is a student loan company. I invested in the company back in 2013 as an angel investor. So fast forward 2021, the company went IPO with a almost a $15 billion valuation. Again, the stock market take a dive, so the valuation drop a little bit, but I think I still do well in there. But one of the key functions of that investment, actually, they're using AI to do credit scoring. one of the ideas is that the traditional way of credit scoring is quite inefficient. It depends on like FICO score, which is actually how much credit or how you spend your money. So as a student, you don't have a good credit score because you're broke. You're trying to pay off your student loan, right? So basically, SoFi did actually leverage different data sources to create sort of like a very interesting profile. They look at your cash flow. They can use various factors to build a model, if you will. And by that, they actually create an AI or machine learning or regression model that allows them to say whether this person is creditworthy, and they can actually lend the product, create a loan towards those, originate a loan, extend the loan to that customer here. Another area that very quite interesting to us is so remember we talked about we focus on ESG. So G is the governance. So we do a lot of work, very focused on cybersecurity. So why cybersecurity? So what governance stands for is actually talk about data privacy. How do you manage your customer data? How do you run the company? And all that, right? So idea is that you can immediately kind of associate that, well, okay, that makes sense. And if you can actually use AI to improve the governance process, how do you protect the data privacy, and cybersecurity protection and all that, that is has immediate relevance towards the applications, right? So AI plays a huge role in it, and also in financial technology. So governance is not specific to financial company, but they probably has the biggest exposure. If your data got leaked, your credit card got, then they have the biggest exposure. They will actually place the heaviest, focus in terms of protecting the data. So they need the technology, and some of the startups that potentially play a critical role in fulfilling that needs, and that's why we want to look at it from that angle. Again, data plays a huge role, and this is how you can actually potentially create a very successful business based on those the pillars that we talked about. The ESG of the world, where now it's come to light that now it makes sense. This is actually why if you actually take care of those things, ultimately the company will be successful, the entrepreneur will be successful because the customers are successful, and that's why this is a very simple formula, but people tend to forget, okay, that makes sense. And then now it's actually going back to our investment thesis here.
Ashok, you have a question?
You have a couple of
Okay, so we have Ashok. Okay, all right.
So I work very closely with US healthcare providers, hospitals, health systems. And one of the things that we have heard lately from a lot of physicians and nurse staff is a lot of nuisance created by alarming system, by patient monitoring systems that are available from the device manufacturers.
Okay.
I'm wondering, you gave an example of the MRI, but has any of the device manufacturers reached out to you, or are you working closely in that area to kind of take out false negatives from the system so that etc.
can we don't have that right now. We haven't invested a lot in the medical device world, but we are well aware of the problem. And I think I mentioned that some of our veteran advisors, they actually have exactly gone through that before. So I'm not an expert in that area, so I can't answer your question. But to me, I think it's just the problem that we're aware of, and that's why we bring in these advisors to our board so that they can actually help tackle these challenges.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay, and then Benji.
Yes. Thanks, Darren. I was just wondering, is it possible you divulge the name of the company that uses AI for credit scoring? The reason why I asked is because, so I'm Nigerian, right? And then one of the banks in Nigeria is looking into doing something similar, like using AI to credit score like their customers. So I was just wondering if you can So like, give me the name of that. I mean, the name of the company that you were talking about.
Oh, it's actually SoFi. Actually,
okay,
it's SOFI. You can just do a Google search. It's a publicly traded company. Yeah, so actually, there's a lot of innovations in those area. And actually, feel free to send me. I think Mladen will send out the slide deck, and actually on the slide deck it has my email address. Feel free to contact me via email, and we can talk offline about some of the opportunity. We're very interested in that area, particularly from the emerging economies. We see a lot of those opportunities there. We'd love to talk to you.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, Darren. I don't know if we've taken a lot of your time, so I think it's time to say goodbye. Thank you very much for giving a
Do you mind if I do you mind if I take a Zoom picture of everybody's on the face? I want to really.
Sure,
I think
don't know
this
what
turned
is the
out
best
to be.
way to do so, but
well, let me try it. Just to if you can turn on your camera at least. I'd like to take a screen capture. The two, is that okay, Mladen?
That is fine with me. Yeah, and like people.
Okay. So really appreciate you guys coming in. It turns out to be the two previous class. They actually turned out to be like the in-person class. So I don't know who I'm speaking to. But people are just like coming in the more regular. So I'm actually thankful that I see all of you. So as most of you are still remote. So let me just do a screen capture quickly. Okay, I think I got it. Okay, all right. Thank you so much, guys. It's been a pleasure. And hope to see you all soon.